The Iran war has created a rupture within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO as it is called. The Western consensus, as it existed for 77 years, is now under unprecedented strain. In a recent interview with the British Daily Telegraph, the US President Donald Trump has said that removing his country from NATO is now beyond reconsideration. Trump once again called NATO a paper tiger and added that he doubts NATO's credibility. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also reiterated this. He said that the United States will have to re-examine the ties with NATO after the ongoing conflict in Iran.
So I think there's no doubt, unfortunately, after this conflict is concluded, we are going to have to re-examine that relationship. We're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO and that alliance for our country. Ultimately, that's a decision for the president to make, and he'll have to make it. We're going to finish the job here.
America and Israel's war against Iran has left American allies in a bind. The point of contention remains the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has closed for U.S. and Israel-linked vessels. The president earlier urged allies to step in to open the strait, but NATO countries have refused to do so. Instead, several NATO countries have openly condemned the military strikes on Iran. UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that it was not Britain's war.
Firstly, NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen, and it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO. Secondly, that whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it.
Other NATO allies like Spain and Italy have blocked American forces from using their bases for strikes on Iran. In fact, Spain has closed its airspace for any U.S. military movement that involves strikes against Iran. Italy has refused authorization for some U.S. aircraft which were headed to West Asia on a combat mission. The aircraft sought permission to land at its Sigonella base. Another NATO ally, France, has only allowed America's logistical transport aircraft to land on its bases. U.S. President Donald Trump has previously said that he will remember NATO's response on the Iran war. He's also added that Washington may not help NATO in future if it's asked to do so. If this is put into action, Europe will have serious security concerns. The United States, remember, is the single largest contributor to NATO's security umbrella. There are about 85,000 U.S. troops stationed across Europe. The Big Five, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics and Boeing all contribute around 50% of the total arms supplies to Europe. Defense equipment, offensive firepower and intelligence sharing. Europe's security is powered by American military-industrial complex. And if Trump indeed pulls the U.S. out of NATO, the Western consensus would enter in a downward spiral, which would be difficult to reverse. All right, let me welcome Mr. Joachim Bittele. He's a former German ambassador to NATO. He's joining us live on the broadcast from Paris. Good evening. Welcome to WION, sir. What are you expecting? In a few hours from now, the U.S. president is going to be addressing his nation. The entire world has its eyes on Washington, D.C. Are you expecting the U.S. to pull out of NATO today?
I don't think so. I'm relatively relaxed about this, even if we have to review deeply the whole system of NATO. It's clear. I suppose Donald Trump will announce the end of war in the Middle East.
Okay. So if that's the case, sir, how do you see the NATO-US relationship post this war, whenever it ends, and if that announcement does come today? How do you see that? Because Donald Trump has been quite frustrated with his NATO allies. He's been voicing his opinions time and again. And Marco Rubio has said that we will be reassessing our ties with the NATO countries. And therefore, how do you see this moving forward?
To a certain extent, I have to understand Donald Trump. because his NATO allies are refusing to support him directly. They refer, yes, we will come once you have established peace. The NATO allies in Europe say, well, it's not our war, but at the same time, it's a war which is, let's say, touching, which is concerning our vital European interests at the same time. And it's true on the one side, it's not an attack against NATO here that would launch, let's say, the NATO defense in this case. No, it's not the case. It's a case outside of NATO. And therefore, to some extent, well, we have to understand the Americans. And Donald Trump, well, is saying, well, we always have been at your disposal in Europe. We have always been supporting you, defending you, and now, once you have to defend us, you are not here with us. It's understandable, but on the other hand, this war in the Middle East is to be looked at with different eyes at the same time. It's in our interest that the threat from Iran is to be ended, yes, it's clear. On the other hand, we are not convinced by all the means Americans and Israelis use, and therefore, Donald Trump is reacting a bit, let's call it furiously, calling NATO a paper tiger, but this paper tiger has been preventing any war, any attack on Europe for the last 60 years. And even if he adds Putin knows our lack of credibility, well, if there had been no credibility of NATO, Putin would have perhaps attacked NATO. But it's not the case. Therefore, I understand the politician who reacts a bit in a furious way, because the Americans, in my eyes, have done basic, I will not call this mistakes. They have been underestimating the Iranian side. I understand that they have been trying to strike the leadership. They have been trying to strike their capabilities on ballistic missiles. They have been trying to strike their capabilities on nuclear. But why the American strategists have been totally forgetting the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz? Perhaps not for the Europeans, but for utmost importance for the whole of Asia, for India, for Pakistan, for Japan, the Philippines and others. Why the Americans have been underestimating totally this side? I can't understand it, frankly spoken.
So, Ambassador Peterle, help me understand this. While you're saying that NATO is right in its place for not getting directly involved in this conflict, Donald Trump has been putting up this posture more so because of his domestic reasons. But do you not think that American strategists understand that there are multiple U.S. bases across NATO countries and defense arms and ammunition that are stored there across European countries that, that helps America fight its wars?
But please, you have been showing us the map. And if you look at the map of Europe, and if you look at the region, it's normal the Americans need, clearly, for example, the Ramstein Air Base, which is the most important in Central Europe, in order to transmit anything direction Ukraine, anything transmitting direction Israel or the whole Middle East or Asia, is of utmost importance. And we don't see that the Americans will give up this. What we have to do with the Americans is to talk openly with them that Europe is ready to take over a greater responsibility in defense, yes, but Europeans have to prepare this urgently, yes.
Okay.
It's time to do it. We have to develop this in a short range of time, yes, and we have to develop a new relationship with the Americans. We have been, let's say, establish a certain consultation process insofar, but the Europeans themselves have to take over more and a greater responsibility for themselves and for, let's say, the whole neighborhood around Europe.
Okay.
It's clear.
Okay. So what you're saying, sir, is, how you say in German, it's going to have to be a guten Tag for the relationship between NATO and America. But I'll leave it there, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective and helping us get a better understanding of this. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure for me.